Paul, let's go straight to it. The X-odus. People are leaving X for Bluesky.
Yes.
In the past, they were leaving X for Parler, and that was right-wingers. Now we've got left-wingers leaving. What's going on?
What's going on? Well, people are beliefist, aren't they? Which means that we are very quick to discriminate against people that disagree with us. Once we find one point of disagreement, we dismiss almost everything that they have to say about anything else. So here's a very simple chain. It's quite obvious, really. It's quite obvious, really. I don't like Donald Trump. Elon Musk likes Donald Trump. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm going to leave X. It's very easy for us to fall into these traps where we move away from the out-group, the people that we don't like, and surround ourselves with the in-group, the people that we more identify with.
Won't people just be disappointed when they get over to Bluesky or wherever and they find that the out-group is also there?
Well, there's always going to be an in-group and an out-group, and those we always find ways of doing that. We're kind of naturally wired, I hate using that term, but it's a very sort of loose way to say that we are wired to find people that are like us.
So what's the evidence for that? Because you've told me before, it's one of the most amazing things you've taught me, is that people are hardwired to agree in groups and be hostile towards the out-group. What is the evidence for that?
Well, I mean, we, throughout our history on Earth, we've identified with people that are like us, and it makes us feel safe, and it would have been literally safe for us to be around our tribe. And that necessarily means, first of all, that actually most of us don't like disagreement, and confrontation.
I have noticed that.
Much to what you observe and much to what we feel. It's actually, most of the time we're looking for agreement. We're looking for consensus. We're looking to agree with our group, and that's why we get manifestations of it in politics, in business, called groupthink. It's very, where we quickly dismiss alternative options because we all fall in line behind one. But at the same time as finding comfort with our in-group, that almost necessitates there to be an out-group, the people that we're very hostile towards, the people that we disagree with. And so a lot of the social media platforms become echo chambers. I mean, you know this to be true. So we find our tribe and we dismiss the people that aren't like us. And if we can't do that on the platforms, then we might leave the platforms. That's sort of partly why what's happening now is that people who don't identify with Trump, with Musk, are saying, actually, I don't really want to be around people that I don't like. Yeah. And sometimes, of course, people do post really hostile, awful things. And we should find ways to get rid of that kind of content.
Okay, so let's tease into, there's so much to discuss here. So you've also taught me that Daniel Kahneman point about thinking fast and slow. Yeah. That people have a quick, intuitive brain and then a more deliberative, slow brain. Might it be that when people are hammering that stuff out, that's maybe a bit offensive and a bit harsher than they would normally have maybe spoken, are they using their fast brain and hammering stuff away and not really thinking? Yeah.
So the first thing to say really is that there aren't two systems in the brain. I mean, it's not as clearly straightforward as that. It's not binary limbic system and the second system being your prefrontal cortex, but it's a very good description or characterization of how we make our decisions. Is you do have a very fast, intuitive system that is emotional, that is automatic, habitual, and then you have a system 2, which is a more deliberative, effortful, slower system. Now, because the human condition likes to conserve attentional energy, we're basically lazy. We don't want to work too hard. So our brain is brilliant at finding ways to make life easier for us. That's why we get habits. We have these habit loops. Yeah. So you're sitting there at your typewriter, I'm saying old, on your phone, or laptop, and you see something that you don't like, and you immediately react, and you post something quite hostile yourself in return to something that you've seen as being hostile. Taking a deep breath can be very effective. Now, if you're having an argument with somebody, this is quite nice advice if you're having a row with Beth. Walk away, not that you ever argue with her, of course, walk away for 15 minutes, and that feels like a long time, but during that time your amygdala will calm down basically, and you can go back to the discussion in a much calmer frame. So one thing that we could all do online is when we're just about to post something hostile, is just don't hit send, or hit send with a 15-minute delay. There must be ways in which we can embed that into social media. That would be trivial
if people wanted it,
If we could do it, put it in. But it's interesting that we don't have those technologies, and maybe partly because these social media platforms quite like creating a bit more of this hostility.
I don't think that I don't know that people even understand the behavioural science. So this whole system 1, system 2, fast, slow brain. The other thing I heard you talk about is that people are very good at rejecting contrary evidence.
We're brilliant at it, yeah.
Go on, tell me about that.
Yeah, well, we don't change our minds about things that matter to us. We change our minds about things at the margin, but not things that really matter to us. And what we're very good at doing is finding evidence that would support what we know to be true.
Yeah.
But then what happens when we find evidence that doesn't support what we know to be true? Well, then we're even cleverer. We find ways of explaining away the evidence.
Yeah.
It's not robust, it doesn't apply to me.
The person saying it has got a motive.
There's all sorts of reasons behind that not being trustworthy. And then, not only do we carry on believing what we know to be true, we're even more right that we know it to be true because we've been clever enough to dismiss counter-evidence.
It's incredible, isn't it? So here we are, we're all hammering away on these keyboards, and all these phenomena are going on all the time, and we know that to be true because that's in the behavioural science, it's well evidenced.
Yes. And I think that one of the things that because we don't like confrontation, even those people that often post hostile stuff, they wouldn't like confrontation, wouldn't like that kind of confrontation, especially in the real world.
Yeah.
Is that, again, it is often easier just to walk away and surround yourself with people that agree with you. We're going to like people that nod their heads rather than shake them.
So tell me a bit about what this means for the algorithms, because I'm thinking that on these social media platforms, they tend to have algorithms that show you what they know you want to see. But then everybody's watching the President of the United States and commenting on what he's saying, which must bring groups together irrespective of whether they normally like that kind of material.
Yes.
So what does this mean for social media platforms actually giving people what they want, but also promoting serious debate, not mere hostility?
Well, I think it's incumbent on the social media platforms to monitor, illegal and extremely offensive content. That's it's like, freedom of speech does come with responsibilities. Because anybody can just say anything, whatever they want, irrespective of its impact. Having said that, subject to those extreme views that wouldn't be articulated, it wouldn't be legal to articulate
like
in the socialist.
Yeah,
exactly. Then the rest of it, we just have to, and I say it's not just put up with, I think it's more than put up with, we should engage with it. I wouldn't want to remove myself. We shouldn't remove ourselves from people that disagree with us. We should be, in fact, even more encouraged to talk to those people, listen to those people, hear what they have to say, because well-functioning societies, well-functioning social media platforms embrace difference.
Yeah. To what end, though? Come on. Why? What's good about embracing difference?
Well, if you were Galileo, you ended up being put in prison for having some really heretic views.
Yeah.
You're a madman, right? In the end, some of these crazy ideas of the mad people are actually really fucking good ideas and turn out to be right. Yeah. So we need to, this is why I get, it's very easy for people to say, that's a conspiracy theorist, or that's a racist. And sometimes it's true, they are, but not always. Not always. Sometimes in the conspiracy theory, so-called, could be a grain of truth.
Yeah.
And over time, that will distill out. If we allow people to express those views, subject to the constraint that I outlined earlier, I think we will be more productive. We might even be happier in the end if we're making better decisions. I know in the short term, it's easier to be around people, we're happier around people that we agree with. Yeah. But in the longer run, if that's going to affect the quality of decision making, especially in a world where we face radical uncertainty, you know what's going to happen to AI or all these things that are happening now. Like, we need to be listening to all sorts of views about that in order to bring them together in some way, to muddle our way through, which is what we're always doing, to improve the world that we're in.
So here we've got the X-odus going on, people leaving X. It sounds like there's a hell of a lot of behavioural science going on in what's going on in people's heads, not just in the X-odus, but also in the day-to-day with the social media. Is there anything that could be done to embrace difference? Use your embrace framework to get in and...
Well, before saying that, I mean, it's interesting that you can... One of the things that the social media allows you to do is to signal things very quickly and costlessly almost.
Yeah.
So there's a performative nature to it.
Yeah.
There's a virtue signalling nature to it. I can, it's very, if I disagree with Trump, with Musk, it's almost like a moral high ground to walk away.
Yeah.
I've asserted myself as being somebody who doesn't agree with those people.
Yeah.
And I can feel good about myself. I can elevate myself amongst the people that agree with me about that.
But whether one likes Musk or not, he's achieved absolutely extraordinary things in the world, hasn't he? So,
yeah, I mean, there's a question about whether people with that amount of wealth should have that much influence. That's a separate point for another day. But yes, you're absolutely right. But because we have this incentive, it is an incentive. It's a reputational incentive to signal our virtue.
Yeah.
It makes it much harder in social media platforms than it might do in real life to be willing to debate. Because walking away from a conversation is much harder in person, like literally walking away, than it is to walk away online, which is largely costless.
Yeah.
So I think we need to think about how we embrace principles in social media, which is the hardest place to do it, but most likely to be the most rewarding and effective places to do it.
Because millions of people are exposed
exposed to it.
So just run through what the words are of embrace. Environment.
Environment. We need to be alert to the fact that most of what we do, given the system 1, system 2 distinction, is driven by context, not by cognition.
Yep.
It's driven by habits, by triggers and cues in the environment, much more than by cognition.
Mistakes.
Mistakes. That's something this is something that we could work with social media platforms to work with, because when you post something, it's there. Like you and I can have a chat, and we can muddle through things. I can say, no, actually.
Correct one another, correct ourselves.
We can go on here, I can say, no, sorry, now I've said that out loud, I realise that's not what I mean. I mean something else. Or you can say to me, I found that offensive. And I can say to you, I'm really sorry, that is not what I intended to do. I appreciate that it's had that impact on you.
Yeah.
And I can try and mitigate it, right? That's what we do.
Yeah.
But we've got to make mistakes. We can't get through the challenges that we face without messing up.
Yeah.
So we have to celebrate messing up. Actually, if you think about most of the things that you've learned from in your life, they haven't been things that went well, because you just take those off and move on.
You're right, of course.
They're things where you've messed up and you learn lessons from.
Is that possible?
Right? So we have to take what we know at the personal level and translate it into our lives, including on social media, which means that we can post things and sometimes then say, actually, I shouldn't have done that, or I got that wrong, or I made a mistake, and be allowed to say, okay.
So that's really interesting. Is there something that could be done on social media that allows people to say, I'm sorry, I messed up there.
Press the mistake button. I mean, that would be, I don't know. I mean, it's like, maybe there is something that could be built in.
Self-flagging, so I'm only human, I'm sorry, I put my hands up, you can have a hand up button, I put my hands up, I'm only human.
Yeah, as long as it's authentic, right? I mean, you don't want to just be saying sorry for the sake of just saying what you like and then saying sorry. I mean, it has to be from a place of authenticity.
Yeah.
But I think, the taking a moment, the embedding mistakes, these are all things that wouldn't be hugely expensive, I don't think, for social media platforms to embed.
Bonding.
But they could.
Bonding.
Bonding. There's more that makes us similar than makes us different. That's we draw attention to what makes us different. Things about us that we've identified as being different. Look at how we're dressed.
Yeah.
But actually, there are some very basic similarities. We both care about freedom of speech, subject to the constraints.
Lifting the poor out of poverty.
We both care about lifting the poor out of poverty. The means by which we get there, we might disagree about, but our end goals are very similar. And most people's end goals, look, they want healthy, productive, happy lives. Right?
Yeah, and for other people too.
And we care about the relationships that we have with other people. Everybody cares about that.
So somehow we need to expose to other people that other person who you disagree with profoundly because beliefism, actually it turns out if you were to bond with them, you've got a lot in common.
Exactly as any otherism. When I categorise someone on a thin sliced piece of information, gender, race, belief, I dismiss everything else about them that we might share.
Huh. Yeah, very interesting. So, reason.
Reason. Although we are not driven by evidence very much in what we do, so the idea that you can give people more information and evidence is going to change minds is completely hopeless.
Yeah.
We do have good reasons for our beliefs. And we're often able to narrate or tell a good story about why we know something to be true. So we have to, on occasion, appeal to those narratives, to those stories, to the reasons that people have. Sometimes reason in terms of evidence, but most often reason in terms of narrative and story. Think about most of the things that you know to be true. They come from sources that you trust, and they have good narratives that sit behind them. So if we're going to embed listening to difference, I need to understand more about the reasons why you hold the beliefs you do.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So A is affect.
Yeah, A is affect. We spoke a little bit about that before. It's feelings.
Yeah.
But also sometimes maybe most of the happiness literature shows us that we get more of the good things that we want in life for ourselves and for society when we're happier. We're more pro-social, we're more open to different views, we're more productive, we're healthier when we're happier. So yes, calm down. Most of the time, some of the time we'll be taking the emotion out of what
some
we
of that's
do.
knowing how the body works.
Good emotion in.
Like the amygdala, you said about taking 15 minutes, the amygdala will calm down.
Sometimes
it's biological, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And and sometimes, I think often people will select into being online or saying hostile things when they're in a bad mood. So not always, but being alert to that will help us. C is for collection.
Yeah.
It's to make the Embrace framework fit with the letters. It's as close to diversity as you can get. But it's better than diversity in the sense that when people's minds immediately go to diversity, they will think of diversity by characteristic, and that's important. It is important, but it's not all that matters. It's more cognitive diversity that really matters. It's having different ways of thinking, different approaches to a problem and to a challenge.
So positively taking a decision to bring people together in a collection who you know are likely to think differently about the problems that come up.
Correct. And in academic research and in ways that we might take out into the business world, there's a concept called adversarial collaboration. Kahneman used that term. He wasn't the first person to do an AC, which is literally bringing together people who explicitly disagree with one another about a theory or model, agreeing on the research methods, and then hopefully changing their minds at the end of it all. But even if they don't change their mind, there'll be more humility, because most often what happens is that neither theory turns out to be the right one, and it makes us more humble in our understanding of what we know to be true, and less hostile than doing angry science, where you present a paper, then I critique it, then you do a reply, I do a rejoinder.
Yeah. I've seen that myself, because I've worked with monetary economists for 20 years. I've watched that happen so often, and it's like every disagreement is an offence to their person and identity.
Exactly that. And the other thing that we do in that, this is important for business practice as well, is that when I'm critiquing your theory or your model or your explanation, is I pick on the weakest link of your argument, right? I clearly don't pick on the strongest, because that's harder. Right? So, but you might have some really good strong elements to it.
Yeah.
But if I undermine the weakest bit, then that's taken as undermining the whole of your
And we could make
idea.
more progress.
We can make more progress
if we identified each other's
Exactly. If we identified each other's strengths and weaknesses of the argument.
Finally, Paul, exposure. E for exposure.
Exposure. If you look at the political science literature, it's not a silver bullet, but it's almost as close as being a silver bullet to political science as anything else, which is being around people that have different beliefs to you.
Yeah.
And what that does, it does lots of the other elements, like for example bonding. It makes us realise that we have more in common than we don't have. And it's been shown that when people move into different areas with different populations, they become more understanding of the difference.
Yeah.
It's interesting because that could take a lot of time, and the idea that you could embed exposure into societies is pretty challenging. But you could think about ways in which, in business environments, you could quickly expose people to different perspectives in ways that might help it stick.
But that might be really straightforward on social media.
And in social media, yes, that's absolutely it. It's a willing. It does require, though, unlike when I've done work on happiness, I don't have to make a case for why people want to be happier. Put that in the first sentence of something, We'd all like to be a bit happier, and people move on to the next sentence. When you say we should be more tolerant of different perspectives, you've got to make a case for that, and the case is for better individual decision making, better societies, better social media platforms. That is the case, but it needs to be made, and so there is an initial hurdle that people need to jump or sort of go through, which is to be willing to accept that they might not always know everything, that they might learn something from listening to this agreement, and even if they don't change their minds, they'll be a better, more rounded individual from listening to people that disagree with them. And you're right, social media offers us a fucking amazing opportunity to do that, but somehow we haven't worked out yet how to do it. And I think getting embrace into social media is one way that we could do that.
Do we believe that behavioural science has actually been applied within social media? I don't think I do.
Well, they've been very good. The social media, the
giants,
I think the tech giants have been very good at getting us to use their platforms in ways that arguably are not in our best interests.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done a very good job. And they're not, I know the social media platforms might not want to hear this, but they're not regulated in any way like any other technology or any other products are, where there's, a case needs to be made for why they will be welfare improving. And I think we're reaching a stage now where the tech companies and the social media platforms will have to do that. They will have to show that their new products are going to be ones that don't cause more harm.
Wouldn't it also be in their interests to create a platform which is actually a pleasure to be part of? Because the in-group, out-group hostility which presently exists and drives people to other platforms has been contained and diminished by the way that the platform works. Because you've described some ways that social media could change better to facilitate people considering the other point of view. Wouldn't that be in the platform's interests to implement that?
Yeah, I think they should. Well, look, I mean, I think it would make more sense for them to go first in some sense rather than to wait for regulation and legislation to come.
Yeah. Because
that's what's going to happen, and they'll only have themselves to blame. I mean, because they haven't acted fast enough.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if people should, I think people. I mean, it's not for me to tell people what to do, but I'm going to tell them what to do. Is to engage with platforms that they don't agree with either the owner or what people say on there, subject to the constraints of not saying things that are completely out of step, but listening to alternative views, listening to crazy people that may become the Galileo one day.
On that note, Paul, thank you very much indeed. Real pleasure.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.